The European Union, it has a huge and educated population and massive wealth. It also has rigid labour laws and crippling tax systems. Joining me now is Damian Chalmers from the London School of Economics to shed light on what is needed for Europe to regain its once competitive edge. Well, Damian, let's start with the situation on the ground and how competitive is Europe compared to the rest of the world?
You have to bear in mind that as a proportion of world trade, the EU still does very well. If we look at something like the World Economic Forum and its views of competitiveness, a liberal measure if ever there is one finds European states very well represented in the top 10, particularly North European states. So there's a danger in focusing on what Europe doesn't do well rather than what it does do well.
What's the major challenges it now faces?
One of the things is that many of Europe's traditional sources of competitive advantage have eroded. That other companies from non-European states, for example, are used to applying European standards now, and something that once gave us a first mover advantage is rapidly disappearing. Europe perhaps had cheaper access to finance than many other parts of the world. I think the differential there is also disappearing.
On to Germany now, and it's a country that's often criticised others for accumulating too much debt. But it's now under investigation by the EU Commission to see if its huge trade surplus can threaten the rest of the bloc. So do you think this could be the case?
Well, it is under investigation by the European Commission. There's this argument that the surplus now exceeds what Germany is allowed to have for the purposes of the macroeconomic imbalance procedure. It's seen as a problem within the EU because there is so much intra-EU trade. And if some of the states in southern Europe are to, if you like, grow their way or export their way out of the current economic predicament, then one of their biggest markets would be Germany. That said, this internal surplus vis-à-vis other euro area states can't be seen in isolation. It is surely a good thing for the EU that one has a measure of an engine of growth and an engine of competitiveness in Germany, which is exporting not just to other EU states but around the world.
Germany is the strongest economy in the EU, so what can other countries learn from it?
I think one has to be very careful about this. Certainly since the beginning of the euro area crisis, Germany has tried to suggest a model which has served its well that should exist for the rest of Europe. Now, it's not clear to me how easy it would be for others either to fit into this model or whether the costs of fitting into this model would just be too severe. Germany is a capital-intensive economy with strong resources in terms of its educational and skills base. This is just not there in certain other euro area states.
How does the gap in competitiveness between the north and the south impact the overall picture?
I don't know is the answer to that. If one was looking at someone like the United States, one probably wouldn't be talking about it in quite the same terms of saying, does the gap in competitiveness between this state or that state affect the US competitiveness? But of course there is a difference. The United States is a single state, it's a federal state. The EU is not, and this means that the EU is more politically turbulent, that different parts of the EU have to account for this relative gap in competitiveness, whilst the centre will obviously, of course, put ever greater controls, as happened in the history of the United States, to check that the less competitive parts of the EU, if you like, up their game. And so what is likely to happen is increasing political centralisation, I would guess.
Are there any policies that have been implemented that you've really thought, oh no, and is there anything that you would have done differently?
I do wonder whether we fight yesterday's wars. So this commitment to constitutionally entrench structural balances or modest structural deficits, I wonder if in a few years' time we'll be looking at that as the next great mistake. It is introducing an inflexibility into the system that is perhaps not a great thing. And I think we might also look at the controls that are currently put on the European Central Bank as the controls of a past era.
Well, what single piece of advice would you give business leaders in the EU if you could make changes?
I think one of the big challenges for business leaders, and they could tell you this across the EU at the moment, is getting access to capital on competitive terms. And that to my mind, is probably a bigger challenge than some of the other restrictions that there's more attention is paid to, such as labour laws and tax laws.
Damian, thank you.
No, it was a pleasure.